Wonderful. So warm greetings to you, colleagues. My name is Mr. Privilege from Grad Quest Consulting and Tutorials. So the purpose of this particular engagement that we are journeying on, it's pertaining to a tutorial orientation class for AUI 4863, which I would like to take you guys through to familiarize you guys in respect to the content for this particular module and what actually makes up AUI 4863 in terms of the assumed knowledge of note, in terms of assessments that they're going to be testing you guys on, right? So without any further ado, let's quickly jump straight into that, right? Just for those of you who are new, Grad Quest Consulting, we are a private tutorial institution, and our specialty as an organization is with respect to varsity tutorial services. And we do offer services from undergraduate level all the way to PhD level. So in your case, you are within the category for the postgraduate level at honors level. So obviously that is why we are engaging with you guys in this respect. And we have got a team of different tutors from different faculties or different specialty, so to speak. So for instance, I understand for majority of you, you are doing your postgraduate diploma in internal auditing. So you discover, for instance, there are modules such as risk management, strategic management, which is your MNGs 4801. Right, we also have a set of tutors that specialize in those modules. So we also offer some tutorial assistance in that respect. But that is something that will be addressed separately by those respective individuals. But what is our primary objective as an entity is to ensure that our students complete their qualifications in record time. How do we aim to achieve this? This is through our value-adding tutorial services. Now, I'm going to explain a bit about our services as we progress within this particular engagement. But one essential thing about us, we believe in teamwork and collective efforts from both the student and the tutor in order to achieve. Please mute yourself. Easy. Thank you. Right. So we believe in teamwork and collective efforts from both the side of the student as well as the side of the tutor in order for us to achieve that primary objective. For more administrative details in regards to who we are and the type of services that we offer, you may also maybe want to go through our website, corporate website, and it explains details in terms of our tutorial services. Some of it, I'm going to touch on it as we move along this particular discussion. So what is the module outline that we are going to discuss, or rather the agenda outline, as you may call it? We're going to talk about the module content, what makes up AUI 4863, what are the different respective topics of note, and I'll be emphasizing on the importance of each one of them as we journey within this particular engagement. I'm also going to talk about the assignments, and then, like I said, in terms of the tutorial services that we provide, what is it that is incorporated within that package? I'm also going to endeavor to give some details in regards to that. Then we're going to have a practical class discussion, and that is where the fourth assignment, which I've already shared the question thereof in the respective groups, that is where the fourth assignment for the 2022 academic year becomes handy. Right, and then I'll also talk about fee structure for the tutorial services that we provide, and the contact details, they're also shown there in the presentation that I've already shared with you guys on the group, but you can still check that in your own time. I want to try and focus more on the first 5 items that I've enlisted on the agenda outline. So to begin with, let's have a look at the module content, right, or the assumed knowledge. What makes up AUI 4863? So one of the things you discover when you are on my UNISA as a platform, these 7 respective topics which you deal with, in AUI 4863, you discover they are shown as different learning units. Different learning units. For instance, it could be something like learning unit 1, 2, and all of that, right? Or maybe as topic 1, but respectively, all right? Now, what I'm saying this because you discover that they don't provide you with a combined study guide for the module. But what you discover, like during my time, because I did this this particular subject I'm talking about now, right? So when I was doing it at that time, one of the things I discovered, they did not provide you with a complete study guide in one document. But then you discover that the learning units that they have broken down on the platform, it's literally explaining the content that is within the combined study guide. That is, if you go back into, for instance, the 2020 study materials or 2019, going backwards, if you look at the study guide then, and you compare those learning units or the topic outline that they have on the platform, it's equivalent to what you find in the study guide. So it's simply the study guide, but just in broken format in a sense. That's what you're seeing there on the platform. Unless otherwise they've changed for this 2024 academic year. But I'm talking from experience, that's how it used to be. But at the same time, I have the combined study guide, which was used then. I used it myself personally when I was studying this particular module. So I'm going to also share that for your reference as you journey within this particular module. Now, what are those topics? 7 of them. So the first one deals with planning. Okay, let me try to move this thing here. Okay. So the first topic, colleagues, it deals with planning and conducting audit engagements. I'm going to explain just a few pointers about that. Then I'll deal with the other topics. So it deals with planning and conducting audit engagements. The moment you hear this particular term, one of the things that should come into your mind is that there is a lot of reference that is made to the IPPF standards, in particular, the performance standard, which you find is part of what they call the 2000 series, right? We're talking about standard 2200, standard 2300 in particular. So that's where the point of reference is made with regards to this particular topic. Of course, like I said, there is a combined study guide, which I'm going to open shortly. I'm going to share that later, but it's one of those useful tools that I utilized and it worked in my favor. So I believe that the same can be true for you guys as well. So let me just maybe open it so you can see it. Just give me a moment to get that opened. Okay, I'm sure it's going to be sharing on your screen shortly. So this is the combined study guide for AUI 4863. And like I said, you only find the combined study guides when you go back into other previous academic year from 2020 going back. So 2020, they were still using the combined study guide, but things changed from 2021 due to COVID and all of that. And that's when they began to split the study guide into separate learning units or separate topics on the platform. But nonetheless, we are still dealing with the same content, okay? So this is the combined study guide. And like, as you can see, the outline of topics that you have in your study guide, it's exactly the same outline of topics that I've summarized or indicated for you guys in that content outline for this orientation session. So I'm showing you this because I want to make sure that you can see that the presentation that I'm giving or the assumed knowledge that I'm trying to describe to you, it's something that you have in your study material, prescribed study material, so to speak. So this is topic 1, planning and conducting audit engagements. And like I say, there's a lot of reference that is made with regards to the IPPF framework, but I do teach in detail about these topics, all of them, in our official group, right? Then, of course, the second topic deals with financial systems auditing. The moment you hear the term financial systems auditing, what should come into your mind is this is much to do with what we call IT auditing. Now, one of the most important sources of reference, apart from your study guide and apart from your prescribed study material, I'm going to refer you to a third year internal auditing module called AUI 3703. You would need that study guide as one of your point of reference or source of reference, especially when you're dealing with financial systems auditing. Yes, they do deal with it to a great extent in your study guide, but there's a lot of value-adding information that you find when you go into the AUI 3703 study guide as well. Then there's compliance auditing. Compliance auditing, it's found even at third year level, like in the likes of your AUI 3702. Now, before I go to compliance auditing, I just want to emphasize something else about financial systems auditing. So when they are talking of financial systems auditing, it is to do with the audit of financial systems within a computerized environment. So that is simply equivalent to what we call IT auditing. IT auditing. And essentially one of the things you're going to be touching a lot on there, it's general controls, as well as the application controls. Okay, we're going to touch a lot about that in the context of topic number 2. And to add on that, another source reference of note especially, it's your audit notes, also commonly known as Jackson and Stans. And I'll give you the precise topic that you need there. It's chapter number 8 of the Jackson and Stans textbook. It deals with IT. Let me open it for you so you can see it. And I'm talking from experience here, colleagues, because, okay. There's one of the assignments that I dealt with the group for 2022. They really did extremely well in that particular assignment. And there was a question on IT. I'm going to show it to you there within this particular document. The highest for that particular assignment in that period, I think he got 96% for that assignment. It was a written assignment, actually. So I did the assignment, obviously, for them, and then I discussed it with them in class, which is one of the things that I'll be doing just for the sole purpose of illustrating how we operate when it comes to dealing with practical questions. But I just wanted to show you this particular chapter in the audit notes, which is essential for topic number 2 in your prescribed material. So chapter 8 in the audit notes, colleagues, it deals with computer audit. Computer audit is exactly the same thing as IT audit. And like I say, very important when you're talking of IT audit, you cannot talk of IT auditing without touching on general controls. You cannot talk of IT auditing without talking of application controls. Now, even if you also go to your prescribed textbook, and to be quite frank, with this particular topic, let me go back here, topic number 2, you also need to make use of your orange textbook, which is performing of audit engagements, right? Performing of audit engagements. Okay, of audit engagements textbook. That is your prescribed textbook, obviously. I think chapter 2 in that textbook deals with IT auditing. You need to also give reference to that, right? All right, let me move to the other topics because I don't want to just dwell on one because we have so many things to cover. But what I'm trying to do is to just give you guys key pointers, sources of references when you're looking at these different respective topics. Then, of course, we've got compliance auditing. With compliance auditing, it's found almost, okay, I think let me point this thing out for you because it will help you essentially as we proceed further. And I might dwell a bit on this because there's information of value that I need to explain to you. The moment you hear compliance auditing, compliance auditing is one that entails evaluation of compliance with company policies or compliance with the law or regulations set by the government, okay? So when you're doing a compliance audit, it is applicable to any department in the organization. So a department may be evaluated in terms of its compliance to the stipulated company policy that governs the affairs taking place within their respective division, okay? And if ever their activities or their functionalities affect external parties, that's where regulatory compliance, or should I say compliance with the laws, comes into effect in that sense. So compliance auditing, ultimately then, it implies therefore that it caters for all the business functions that takes place within the organization. And when I'm talking about the business functions, guys, I'm referring to what we call business cycles. I'm referring to what they call business cycles. All right. There are different types of business cycles. And like I said, these are functions that take place within an organization. So number one, which I would attribute as a business would involve itself in selling of a product or providing a service to its consumers. That's where revenue and receipt cycle becomes handy. Number two, a business would at some point get involved in procurement of certain things. It could be a service that they are procuring, requesting from a service provider outside, or it could be a product that they are buying. Think of it in the context where they are buying inventory for resale, right? So that's purchases and payments cycle. Number three, because a business entity cannot exist without people, there is need for them to effect what they call a human resource and payroll cycle. Very important. And then last but not least, there will definitely be some industry or some organizations functioning in an industry where they are producing a product, all right? And in that process, they will be effecting something called inventory and production cycle. Most of these things, you are familiar with them because you were introduced to these at a third year level, but you're still seeing the same thing coming in at AUI 4863, partly of course in topic 3, but you know, the same thing, you can also find it almost in the rest of all of these other topics you're going to see there. Why am I saying that? For instance, if we are dealing with an evaluation where they are testing on operational auditing, all right, it will be an operational audit for a department that is affecting any of these. It could be a department which is literally selling a product to the customer. So we want to understand their effectiveness. We want to understand their efficiency. How is that department for sales performing economically? That's where operational auditing becomes handy. So it still takes you back to the cycles at the same time. Similar story is with regards to fraud auditing, right? With fraud auditing, fraud can take place anywhere. It could be in the sales function, which is where revenue receipt comes in. It could be with regards to the procurement division of the organization where they are buying, you know, inventory items, or where they just, you know, perhaps procuring a service from a service provider outside. Fraudulent activities could take place in any of these functions or cycles that can be affected by an organization. It could even also take place internally within the human resource and the payroll cycle. Think of it in the context where there is a case whereby there are ghost employees, right, that are being paid by the organization, you know, and somebody obviously in that case is soliciting funds, you know, that belongs to the organization for their personal benefit, whereas the business is not gaining any value from those non-existing, employees, so to speak. That's where, in that case, that is where that is an explanation of how fraudulent activity could take place in the human resource and the payroll cycle. The same thing is true with inventory and production cycle. Think of it, the people that involved in the production cycle, they could collude with the suppliers to overcharge the company in terms of the raw material. So they could be overcharged, whereas the procurement personnel for raw materials is actually colluding with the supplier to overcharge the company so that they can be able to gain the difference there from normal standard pricing that ought to be charged, right? So it's important for you colleagues to have a good and clear understanding of this. But like I said, business cycle, it's something that you guys should have already mastered from an undergrad level. So what I'm going to do, like I said, it's something that you should have already known from undergrad level. I am going to endeavor to take you through some of those cycles as part of a recap. But at the same time, when I explain any one of these business cycles, I'll be aligning it to any of these forms of audits that we as auditors can be expected to perform. So you might find, for instance, if I'm dealing with compliance auditing, right, maybe I'll be teaching you something to do with revenue and receipt cycle. So we do a question relative to that. If it's something to do with operational auditing, maybe I can teach about maybe a purchase and payment cycle. Then I'll bring in, some notes. Of course, there are notes I have also on operational auditing. I'll teach you something about operational auditing and then take you to a question maybe that's dealing with procurement or purchases and payment cycle. But like I said, these business cycles, they are applicable in any of these forms of audits. So we can perform audits, operational audit on revenue and receipt, operational audit on purchases and payments, operational audit on human resource and payroll, operational audit on inventory and production cycle. So guys, you need to have a good understanding of these things. Now, why am I saying you need to have a good understanding of that? Simply because of what the examiner tests you in the exam. Now, let me give you that detail. So I'll call this examinable items. Now, what I'm indicating as examinable items in this context, and it's applying to all of these types of audits that you're looking at. I'm talking from chapter number 2, 3, 4, 5. Partly inclusive of topic 6 as well. These things can be examined in your exam questions. Number 1, guys, they would ask you to identify weaknesses in a system. Number 2, they would ask you guys to identify risks in a system. Number 3, they would ask you guys to recommend, all right, internal controls, or to give recommendations, so to speak. So when they ask you to give a recommendation, all right, it's simply the same thing as to say recommend an internal control, all right? They can ask you about that, or they can ask you to recommend strengths that can be deployed in the system description, in the context of an exam or an assignment. Number 4, besides identifying weaknesses, risks, and then giving the appropriate internal control measure to mitigate those, they can also ask you to draft the following: audit objectives. They'll ask you to draft audit procedures. Very important. There's a difference between an audit objective and an audit procedure. With an audit procedure, just to amplify a little bit about this, there are 2 types of audit procedures they will ask you about. It's either they're going to ask you to draft test of controls. Sometimes they don't specify that they want you to draft test of controls per se. They can simply say draft audit procedures to test for the following assertions, something like that. You need to know what exactly are they requesting for. But like I'm trying to explain to you, when you're talking of audit procedures, there are 2 groups. So there's something called test of controls, and then there's something that we call substantive audit procedures. All these fall within the category of audit procedures. And just to add to this All right, substantive audit procedures. There's also what we call analytical procedures. It's just a type of a substantive audit procedure. So with analytical procedures, just as a recap, because it's something you should know from undergrad level, it's just an analysis of change in changing the attribute of information. So it could be when you're comparing, let's say, budgeted versus the actual performance. So you want to ascertain, okay, what is the change that is, what is the difference between the actual and the budgeted, budgeted amount that the company planned to spend versus what they've actually spent. So you're trying to determine if there's a change in the trend or whether there's consistency, okay? Right. So that's where analytical procedures come from. But I'm just giving this at a high level. I'm not explaining the details of this in this engagement. We explain more in detail about this in our official group. But very important, colleagues, if you want to check for sure whether what I'm explaining to you is true and whether it is applicable, go into any of the 4 past exam papers. I can bet on this, that you will definitely find questions where they are asking you to identify weaknesses. You will definitely come across questions where they might possibly be asking you to identify weaknesses, all right? Or perhaps even to recommend internal controls somewhere. They will ask you questions about audit objectives, audit procedures, right? They will definitely ask you about this, right? So this is just part of the examinable items which they could probably test you on, right? Just to illustrate with on this particular aspect, this is a 4th assignment. It's a written assignment for 2022 academic year. I just want to quickly take you just through the required section of the question. Then you can get a typical picture of kind of questions that they ask. So for instance, if you look at question 1 in this 2022 academic year assignment 4, here is what they're asking. They're asking you to explain the internal control objectives, right, of objectivity, the internal control objectives of validity, accuracy, and completeness, where in the context of what? Sales, in the what right there, guys?
It's the revenue.
Revenue and receipt cycle, right? What was I talking about earlier? I mentioned that you need to have valuable information when it comes to what? To business cycles. So what cycle were they testing about in the context of this question? It was revenue and receipt cycle. In this context, they wanted internal control objectives, but with precise, precise alignment to those, what we call assertions, okay? So the moment you hear of validity, accuracy, completeness, presentation, existence, occurrence, those are what we call assertions. There are 2 types of those assertions. So you've got assertions that relates to transactions and records, assertions that relates to account balances. But yeah, that's a subject for another day. But it's part and parcel of the things you would definitely need to know, right? So now, question 2, identify and explain what then? Weaknesses. In what? In the internal control, in the aspects of TAP, PTY Limited's what? Revenue, receipt, cycle. So yeah, do you see that whenever they ask for a cycle, it can be anything to do with control objectives, weaknesses. Okay, then of course, there are other things I've outlined earlier there. Identifying risks, recommending internal controls, audit procedures. Though in the context of that question, they were not asking of audit procedures, but most of the things which I've indicated or attributed to be examinable items, that's exactly what is being tested right there in the context of your questions. Let's go to question 2. Right, question 2, it was more to do with an IT audit. So it was mostly what I would call a test of your assumed knowledge. So they were testing the blueprint. Okay, they were testing your understanding of the blueprint, but at the same time, they also wanted you to apply, to do the application side of it, which is what they were asking in question 2.3. So that's more of internal controls, but in the computerized environment, which is like what I said, I will teach you guys from the context of chapter 8 in the audit notes, which I was showing you guys earlier from here. right? So that was assignment 4. I can even show you even the most recent past papers or last of last year papers, whatever. If we open them and then I take you through the required sections, you would see these things that I'm talking about. But for the interest of time, I may not be able to do that right now. We can do that in the official group. But for now, I would like us to proceed to the other aspects. So guys, let's connect again using the same links to proceed with video B of our orientation. Thank you. Because this one is just left